me?
All right, welcome everybody. This is Vishan Boric from Marshall Way Network, and we're so glad to have you here for our second season of Marshall Way Network TV. We are excited to offer you today a topic that's pretty near and dear to my heart because I'm really into martial arts etiquette because I really feel like that's so important to generate the type of humility and honor that's necessary for having a school of respect. We're going to be talking today about certain things that a lot of times are not said in a martial arts situation. Like you might embarrass yourself with your etiquette and not even know that you did so simply because you're unaware of the etiquette in the dojo. And etiquette, if you're not familiar with that, is your manners. It's how you behave. It's how you act. It's how you look at people. It's, you know, when do you bow, when do you not, when do you approach someone, when do you not. And, you know, it's a lot of things all wrapped into one. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today. So get excited. Go ahead, log in the chat window below if you're with us live today, and answer. We'll ask any questions that you have. Any questions that you have, we will be pleased to help answer those as soon as we can. All right, so the title today of our presentation is Martial Arts Etiquette, General Guidelines for Not Making a Fool of Yourself. So with that said, I'm going to start us off with Dr. Leach. We're going to hand it over to him. When you're ready.
Okay, thank you. This first chance I got. Can you hear me okay? Hello? Okay, good. We're going to talk about etiquette today, and some of the most important things about etiquette is knowing where the martial arts etiquette came from. And basically, it's a Confucian philosophy. That philosophy says that the people of higher rank are respected, and people of older age are respected. And rank always takes precedence over age. So when we translate this into a martial art, it's more like a military organization as far as rank goes. And the upper belts are to be bowed to. The lower belts, on the other hand, bow to the upper belt. So in the matter of communication, if you're lower, you always bow to the upper. Now, within that same grade of age factor takes over, and younger people bow to older people. This is the way that things are set up, and it's respect of rank, and it's respect of age, and this is important, the etiquette in martial arts. Now, when we go into another dojo or we deal with other martial arts, we need to show that same amount of etiquette there as we would see from within our own dojo. And when we do that, it's important to exhibit a quality that we call humility. And if I can read this off of some of my notes here, and I want to define humility for us so that we all come on the word. Humility is a serene state of mind exhibiting a non-judgmental tolerance and understanding with a modest of one's own importance. This means as you get up in the ranks, you shouldn't be getting more. You should show more and more humility, and I think that's necessary. Also, and a lot of blustering and this sort of just shouldn't be there. I belonged to an organization one time, and they didn't bow to anybody because they were the only legitimate system in the world. Therefore, legitimates don't bow. I might also add that the head of this organization was under on the military frauds page, and had a whole bunch of issues in that area. Um, Within each system, of course, we're going to have variations of etiquette, and this is what we're going to talk to, this issue we're going to talk to today, is some of the difference in issues and how each system interprets them. Within the sword system, etiquette becomes extremely important. Here we're dealing with a very dangerous weapon, a live weapon, and it is necessary to continuously watch where that the blade, the hop, is, even when it's sheathed within the sail. It needs to be, and this is indicative of being able to draw the weapon, and carrying it in the right hand makes it very difficult to draw. So as one proceeds of the sword, even the needling, the placement of the hakama flowing out of that, the placement of the sword, the placement of the segio, the cord on the sword, are all important. You go through this etiquette and actually put the sword on oneself. It has to be done in a very, very strict manner to assure that everyone is doing the same thing and that we're all mates. This is extremely important. The brings up and that we must make sure that the placement of that blade is not towards another person. That is, when I'm presenting the blade to you, I want to make sure that that blade points to me. And when you get it, you want to flip that sword over, or you should flip that sword over and make sure that blade flips to you. Now, different systems have different ways of inspection of that sword. Some only allow it to come out at a certain space, certain length. Others allow only a few inches at a time, and then continue permission for another view of it. And in this section is looking at the blade for nicks and other things that might how well cared for. So this blade at extreme and is highly
Dr. Leach, you're breaking up quite a bit.
System. Okay, I guess I'll leave. I'll sign off, and you go ahead with your program. Okay.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. And you know, if you missed some of that, some of it was breaking up. You know, really, in a nutshell, the way that you act in a dojo and when you're visiting somebody else's dojo is you do as that dojo does. Or if it's not called a dojo, maybe it's a dojang, the martial arts studio, wherever you go. If you are visiting someone else, you should act the way that those students act as far as showing the proper manners. If you're not sure, and a lot of times you're not sure, then ask before you attend the martial arts studio. You know, ask what some of their rules and etiquette are, so that you don't make a fool of yourself. So I'm going to speak briefly now on just a few things that are pretty much universal with most of the dojos and martial arts studios that I've visited. And I have visited a lot. I don't know if you caught that from Dr. Leach, but one of the things that he's done, and he got me into several years ago, is visiting other martial arts studios all over the United States specifically. in the purpose of learning new things, and also to see the types of manners and etiquette and the ways that other studios teach. And so it's been a really valuable experience for us to see that, to learn from that, and to gain that knowledge that we can then share back to our students. So here are just a few things that I've found to be true in all of the martial arts studios that we've been to, okay? Number one, it is never okay to wear shoes onto the mat, okay? I don't care if you're a visitor who has no intention of actually going out and participating in class. It's not okay to just walk out on the mat floor with shoes on, okay? So make sure that you take those off out of respect. And typically you'll see a location where most of the students that are there are putting their shoes, and it is very polite to not just throw your shoes off, but to actually line them up neatly before you just walk away from them, okay? So that's one thing that's universal. The other thing is to bow. It is polite to bow no matter what martial arts studio that you're at. It is very polite to bow before you enter the mat. With some studios, it's recommended you even bow before you enter, like right as you open the door into their studio. It is recommended that you bow at that moment. So it's never, my philosophy is you can never bow too much, okay? So if you're ever in doubt, just bow at the entrance of the studio that you're visiting, or if it's a brand new place that you're interested in training, bow there, and then bow once again when you enter the actual mat area. One other thing that I've learned is that people put their shinza, which is their seat of honor in their martial arts studio, in different places. Some traditional dojos will have it up high. It's usually a shelf up high. And when you bow, you are supposed to turn and bow towards that. That's the focal point when you enter a traditional Japanese or Okinawan style martial arts studio. Now, in other systems, I'm going to ask some of the gentlemen here that have a Korean background in their studies as to where their focal point is. But in the past, I also took Taekwondo, and I know that it was polite to turn and just face the flags. And that was the focal point in the room, was to turn, face the flags, bow there, and then obviously look out for whoever the highest rank is and make sure you show respect by bowing to them. Okay, so the other part of it is the bowing itself. I have learned that it is much more polite to bow slowly without slapping your legs or making a scene. When you bow, how you do it also shows the level of respect and manners that you have. I've seen people that come in and they do it really rapidly and they slap their legs. To me, that shows that they don't have that spirit of humility that's so necessary for learning. Okay. One other thing that I think is general, and I hope these gentlemen will agree with me, we're going to find out here because I'm going to start questioning them, is that you should never come into another person's dojo or martial arts studio or dojang and ask to spar with somebody. Okay? That's not polite. You just don't walk in and say, hey, I want to spar with your black belts, or I want to spar with so-and-so, I want to prove myself, or whatever it is that you feel you has prompted you to do that. That is not polite at all, okay? I don't know why some people do that. In my past, I've had somebody come in and they just wanted to prove themselves and they wanted to spar. So it's never okay to do that. Now, obviously, we have opportunities. I know that Mr. Osborne has something called Spar Wars that he does, which is an amazing opportunity for other schools to come in and practice sparring together. That's wonderful. That's a great way to get that experience. But don't ever just show up at a martial arts studio and expect that it's like a fight club where you come in and you can just spar with whoever you want by asking to do that. In some systems, they might just show you the door, and not in a very nice way, I might add. So you got to be really careful about that. I'm sure there's others, but those are just some of the general things that I've picked up in my travels and in going to other martial arts studios. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over actually to Mr. Osborne. I'd like to ask you a few questions on the Korean style and have you share some of your experience on manners that you expect, not only from your students, but from visitors. All right,
Can
Mr.
you hear me?
Osborne, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Excellent.
So if
Yeah,
you could, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going
Sorry.
to ask you if you could share in your own experience. I know you've been doing this a long time. It's kind of been in your family for a while too. What are some things that you recommend for a brand new student coming into the Korean system that they should understand as far as manners and etiquette?
Well, one of the things that you brought up, the first thing is courtesy as far as the bowing goes. You know, one of the things now with today's culture is trying to distinguish not the cult following that sometimes people think martial arts has. Like we do, like exactly what you said. When we have a new student, you know, the first thing we do is teach them to bow the flags. You know, we have a Korean flag and an American flag hanging. You know, we're just showing respect to the country that we're in. Then we're also showing respect to the country that which our system came from, which is Korea. And of course, I always throw in a little joke that we're bound to the South Korean flag, not the North Korean flag. But nobody ever gets my joke. So, but yeah, we definitely show the students how to bow in properly first. Even with our new students, the yes sir and the yes ma'am. We are, and I have visited some schools, and I know some schools are getting loose on this. You know, the proper formation as far as bowing goes, we're still a throwback school. Our warm up and our exercises are still the up and down the floor exercises, which similar to most karate schools and I would call old school taekwondo schools. And so, you know, we
Oh, it looks like you might have froze up, Mr. Osborne. All right, we're going to come back to you on that. I'm going to go ahead and, you know, until you come back and I see motion here, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mr. Rose. And Mr. Rose, if maybe you can express some of your experience in regards to, you know, the etiquette and things that you've seen in your school and other schools that you visited.
Right, and I'm like you. You're talking about Dr. Leach. I've always liked to visit other schools, particularly when I travel, because there's a lot less, I guess, ego involved, or a lot less fear of someone having ego involved when you're 3 states away from where you're typically at. But I think that's the biggest thing for me. Dr. Leach already mentioned it: humility. And just to expand on that a little bit for someone who may not, or may think they know what humility is, or whatever, that comes down to a lack of ego. And we throw that around a lot in martial arts. We talk about leaving your ego at the door, taking your ego away. But I also have some people, even adults, that finally come to me months later and they go, well, what exactly do you mean by that? And really what we mean by that is that part of you that will feel humiliated at times, that part of you that feels like you just have to win or that you can't lose, that part of you that cares more about yourself than the people around you. That's what we mean by your ego. And as long as you drop that, what I've found is even if you don't know or understand the etiquette at a different school, that as long as you walk in with no ego and they can see that, and you have a smile on your face and you're quick to apologize if you found that maybe you didn't follow one of the rules or whatever, that they're very quick to just help you. And they'll be very courteous back to you, and they'll show you exactly what you need to do. Similar to how I think most schools with a new student. New students usually come in, especially kids, they have no idea when to bow and what the words mean and this, that, and the other. So they just come in, and so we just take them to the side and we show them. If they mess up once or twice, or even a few times, it's okay. We just try to remind them, hey, you know, there's a reason we bow. It's not just about respect for me. It's about leaving your problems at the door. You can come back to them when our training's over. But right now, we're focused on making you better, helping you get better, and helping the people around you be better, and helping you to make the people around you be better, most importantly. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm jumping all over the place, but I was kind of making notes on some of the stuff you were saying. You were asking about Korean etiquette, and we don't exactly follow the more traditional Korean etiquette. But from my understanding of it, for example, you bow to the flags, you face the flags, and you bow to the flags, which is typically also supposed to be facing east, as well as when you do your forms, you should be facing east. I don't know how that is in necessarily Japanese styles or any of that. I've studied some Japanese styles, but I've never had anyone explain it to me. But here at my school, we don't face east because the building is narrow, and it just doesn't work out that way. So what I prefer here is I have everybody face the blank wall. By the blank wall, what I mean is we have a couple mirrors on that wall, we have our flags on that wall, and I have everybody face the blank wall so that they don't feel like they're being watched. They're looking other people in the face all the time. And then when we do line up and bow, we line up by rank. And we do so highest rank to lowest rank in the back. And some people, have come in and said, we usually do lowest rank in the front, make them feel better. And I say, it's not about necessarily making them feel better. For me, when they're in the back, if we stay lined up like that, doing something, maybe up and down the floor drills, something like that, then they're kind of in the back. And they don't have to feel like everybody's eyes are on them. So they can feel a little bit more comfortable in trying to do things and in messing up, and not necessarily being on the front row and being the eye or the center of attention. And so I always felt like that's very important. And one of the things we do at our school is if you don't have your belt, so say, I'm visiting another school too, and I don't have my belt with me, but they've invited me on the floor, I will immediately, unless they tell me otherwise, line up in the very back. And that's the way we do at our school. I don't care what rank you are. You don't bring your belt, you line up in the back. That's just part of it. The sirs and ma'ams courtesy, also extremely important. I know Mr. Osborne was already bringing that up a little bit, and you were also talking, Ms. Borich, about the bow, the humble bow, and that's one thing that we kind of work both ways. We always talk about when you bow to another person, when you bow on the mat, when you bow in the dojo, using that slow, humble, mindful bow. But at the same time, classes can get a little crazy, and you need to get through things fast. And so when you hear attention stance at my school, when we do attention stance, you hear shayat, you do slap the legs, because I want to hear that sharp. I want everybody paying attention. I want to be able to hear that everybody's paying attention. And I'll also ask for a yes, sir, at that moment, so I know that all eyes and ears have come back to the focal point. As far as respect, like Mr. Leach was talking about, it is more traditional to show, I guess, more respect to higher ranks and more respect to age in regards to being in martial arts. But for us, to me, if I don't have the ability to bow to a beginner, or I don't have the humility to bow to a beginner just because my belt is dyed black, then I don't need to be teaching. I think so. We talk about bowing to everybody, always bowing to your partner, always bowing before a drill. Bow to each other after every session, after everything you're doing with each other, and showing the same amount of respect and the same amount of humility from the youngest and most inexperienced person training in the school, or even if they're 2-3 years old, all the way up to the oldest and most experienced. That same respect should be showed across the board. And if you can show that same respect to all the students of another school, then you're going to be fine visiting another school. They'll usually welcome you for the most part. As far as being partners, whether you're visiting another school or in your own school, I think this classifies both ways. You're talking about not just walking in and asking to spar your black belts or spar this, spar that, and we've had that happen before. But to me, my answer to that usually always is, I don't care what rank you are in another system. I don't care what that is. I don't, unless we're here for a sparring night, like we do some, like Mr. Osborne does. I don't want to have you spar any of my black belts, any of my high ranks, until I see how you are with the kids or with the low ranks. Because if I put you with the low rank and you can't slow yourself down enough to try to help them, then I don't want to put you with my high ranks either. And so what I'm getting at here is when you're working with partners, your goal is to help the other person get better as much as it is to get better yourself. Sometimes you can have partners that push you. Sometimes you can have partners that maybe you're not quite up to your level of endurance or your level of strength or your level of flexibility or skill. But that doesn't mean humiliate them. That doesn't mean railroad them. In my opinion, no one should ever come in the door and feel humiliated unless maybe they kind of ask for it. I think we've always had I think all of us have seen a few people that kind of ask for it. But, just show a willingness to not humiliate others and to help others get better, no matter what you're doing. The other thing I run into a lot is all of us like questions. All teachers like you to ask questions. But there are some guidelines that I think are pretty universal across schools for asking questions and things like that. If the teacher, the instructor, the sensei, the sabanim is talking, probably not a good time to just blurt out your question. You should probably, if you're afraid you'll forget it, you might just raise your hand, hold it there. Sometimes, me personally, sometimes I'll stop mid-sentence if I'm not saying anything all that important and say, okay, well, what's your question? Does it relate to this? You know, but also don't be afraid to ask those questions. So I get a lot of beginners, adults and the beginners that will be doing a drill, and in certain types of drills, I always say, communicate with your partner. I do want to hear you guys talking to each other. I want to hear you guys helping each other out. And sometimes the beginner adults just want to stay quiet the whole time, and they're having trouble with something, but they're not willing to ask the question. And I'll say, you know, if I haven't come over to help you, if I haven't seen what you're struggling with, raise your hand, holler at me, let me come over and help you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's very, very important as well. As far as shoes, it's very much a universal thing to take your shoes off, no shoes on the mat, and we're very much the same way. I do understand why some schools do certain things, like they'll go outside, do some training with their shoes on, help strengthen the joints and stuff, but until you're used to some of the techniques, it's not a good idea for safety on the joint ligaments and all that. But I don't know if some people are aware that there's more to it than that. There's more to the bare feet than just keeping the mats clean or joint safety. A lot of martial arts relates to conditioning of the body, conditioning of the bones, conditioning of the ligaments, tendons, muscles, not just strengthening, but having the ability to also build the endurance in that, to be able to take a hit, to be able to take high strains and things like that. And if your foot is always protected by your shoe on heavy bag work and stuff like that, you're not getting the conditioning. So I get asked all the time, what are various reasons why martial arts don't have no shoes on? I'd say, well, and that's my answer. I'll tell them the obvious etiquette stuff, but a lot of times it comes down to you're not really going to get any real conditioning on your feet, on your bones, and your joints, on your shins if they're always protected. So we do it lightly. It's not like we go around kicking walls straight off the bat, but you know, you definitely need to have that bare skin contact. And let's talk about a self-defense scenario. I mean, a lot of us have just tripped while walking and had a shoe fall off. So what's going to happen? You get pushed down and that shoe falls off. You know, wait a minute, got to put my shoe back on, or this might hurt my foot. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to it. And what I guess the point I'm trying to make is most etiquette in any dojo, dojang, whatever, there's a reason behind it. And if someone is, if you mess up or whatever, if someone is explaining the etiquette of their school, be sure to ask, what are the reasons behind it? Why do you guys do this? Because there is usually something deeper to it. There's usually something to be learned from it. And again, I can't stress it enough. I've already said this once. But when you're sparring or you're doing some harder drills, I know I grade my adults and more talented students more on how they handle getting in the ring with a 4-year-old than how they handle getting in the ring with somebody of their own ability. It's far more important to me, always showing that courtesy. We always talk about karate, martial arts as a defensive art. Part of defense is your ability to recognize dangerous situations, de-escalate dangerous situations, and the best ways to do that are through courtesy, integrity, discipline, and just showing good manners and etiquette. All right, so I'm going to pass it back over to you with that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rose. Excellent advice and tips and ideas there. So let's hand it back to Mr. Osborne now that I see he's back.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Go ahead. We can hear you fine.
Well, you know, actually, a lot of things that I was actually touching base with, that's what Mr. Rose just kind of went over. You know, the biggest thing in the structure of martial arts when you're a first student is, you know, humble cannot be stressed enough, that word being humble. So if you've got a brand new student coming in and you've got age differences and size differences, and no matter what the size, no matter what the age, no matter what the belt rank, if everybody's addressing each other as sir and ma'am and showing that humbleism right off the bat, that sets the tone for the rest of their martial arts career. And the instructors have got to reflect that. Your assistant instructors have got to, you know, reflect that. Your higher ranks have got to reflect that. Everybody's got to show that humbleism. and the thing that we keep talking about and bringing back up as far as visiting other dojos, that to me is key. I think that is one of the most important things we can do, especially if you want to teach in martial arts, or if you've been an instructor for a while and maybe you've hit a stalemate on what to do on certain things. Going around, visiting other schools, learning ideas, learning different ways to approach different situations, drills, tips, training techniques. The biggest thing when you walk in, we're talking about respect and courtesy when you're walking into it. If you walk into another school and you project being a humble person, you'll always be welcome into everybody's school. If you walk through that door, people can tell when you're humble and when you're not. If you come in like you guys are talking about as far as with your sparring gear, you just kind of drop it at the door as soon as you walk in, then they probably know that you're looking for a situation. And so, but if you walk in and you project that humbleism, which I believe you can tell who's humble and who's not. But if you walk into other schools and you project that humbleism, I think you're going to be welcome 99% of the time. It'd be a rare instance to where you wouldn't be welcome with having somebody walk into a school. So, I'm a big believer when we talk about etiquette is, like you said, recognizing right away on what the etiquette is of that school. I've walked into Kempo schools. I've walked into Japanese schools. Everybody has a different way of system of doing things. And it's not that it's foreign to us, maybe a different system or a different style, but what they're trying to teach and what they're doing is all relatable to what we're doing. And we can all adjust what we do to what they're doing in that school. So one of the things that we talk about etiquette and stuff like that, but that to me is kind of the key thing I've heard everybody say already on the call is going to other schools. And this might be a little bit of a rabbit tracks or side note, but going into other schools I think is very, very beneficial to any instructor. And to project that humbleism, if you teach that in your school, you're going to project that when you go and speak to another instructor. And if you have that kind of courtesy with another instructor, in my personal cases, those instructors have opened their doors to me, and they have shared any information without ever asking for anything in return. So, that is the one thing when you're talking about etiquette, that is the key word for me on etiquette, is just being humble. If you are humble, you may make a mistake in that school, you may bow wrong or do something, but if you always stay humble and you teach your students to stay humble, you and your students will always be welcome with other people, and you'll build a student base that is based off humbleism. No matter, and especially with my group, I mean, we train and sparring all the time. That's what we do. We fight a lot. We fight in tournaments, and we do that. So no matter how good of a skilled of a fighter you are, if you can always remain that humbleism, that translates into everything else that you do. So I just wanted to retouch back on that. Mr. Rose actually hit a lot of points that I was going to hit, but visiting other schools and projection, how you project yourself and how you treat others, that is the key. That's how you gain acceptance and respect. Yeah, I mean, some people do want respect for sparring, and they want to go in there, and those guys want to show, I want to show everyone how good of a fighter I am, and that's how I get your respect. But a lot of times, as we get older, the sparring goes, and if we haven't learned humility early on, there's going to be a day when somebody's younger and faster and stronger than me, and I can still get the respect by being a martial artist and being humble to them, not by how hard I can knock them through the wall. I mean, there has to be a point in time where that translates to where we're not a fighter anymore and we don't have a fighter's mentality. What are we going to do with ourselves once that runs out? Youth catches up with us. There's not a magic crystal ball that tells you, okay, when you get 38 years old, you're not going to be able to fight anybody more like the way you used to. But if you have humbleism and you go and you teach that, then those days when you're not able to spar, you're not able to go hard, you're still going to gain respect from other martial artists because of the way you project to them and the respect that you show to them. It doesn't have to be in the ring. It can be just how you respect them and their art and what they do and what they teach. And so those are the things that are key for me when you're talking about visiting other schools and you're talking to other instructors. No matter what your personal opinion is on that, always be humble. Always be humble.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. I did have one more question for you. If you could, in your own words, describe what humility means to you, I mean, what would be something that would symbolize humility?
Well, with being a sport type of system, okay, we are sport martial artists, and I can tell my level of competition with my students compared to other ones, or I can tell how my school is compared to another school. Humility is knowing that, yeah, we may have a little bit more talented base than that school, but that school will never know that unless they got into the ring with us. Maybe that's a school that doesn't compete very much, and we watch them spar and we watch them do things, and we know that maybe they're not or haven't been exposed to the things that we have. We would still treat them like a school that was a championship school. And this all goes back to sport. I mean, that's my world and that's where I exist in. But I still treat that school like it's a school that would take my school and mop my school up. Even though I know in the back of my mind, if our student maybe talent pool is a little bit greater than theirs, I still show them the same amount of respect as I would a school that was more talented than us, had more students, and even the schools now that are commercial schools, maybe they don't want to take their students out to compete, but I show them humility because they get to live martial arts every day. I don't teach martial arts as a full-time job. I don't get to do it. I want to do it, and I would love to be able to do that, but I give all the respect in the world. If you can get a school and you can grow it and that can be your income, that to me gains more respect than anything in the world. So there's different levels of humility for me. I respect other people for what they're doing and how they do things. So it can be from a talent base, it could be from a professional base, how they run their school. So having that humility always, and I can learn, and that's the other thing too. The biggest thing is too, it's very rare that I have been to a school that I didn't learn something. Whether if they were a talented school, if they were a big school, small school, if I walk into a school and I can stay for a couple of classes, I'll pick something up every time. So to walk into a school and having that humility of going, you know what, I already know everything. I'm pretty good. My kids, they win all the time at tournaments, and we're this and we're that. That is not the case for us, and that's not the case for me personally. I can walk in any school, no matter what somebody else may think of that school, and I'll pick up something from that school and learn every single time. It is very rare. I don't think, actually zero, probably zero. I've ever walked into a school and not learned something. So that's what humility to me is giving that school respect no matter what the talent level is, what the size of the school is. It could be a school of 5 people in a church program. That doesn't matter. You're going to be able to pick up something. So having that humility to learn from that individual, to me, that's what it is to me.
Great. Thank you for that definition. That's great.
You bet.
All right. Well, let's hear from Mr. Roach now. I'd like to hear, if for those of you, this is your first Marshall Way Network, I didn't really introduce everybody like I normally do. We do have on our website it's marshallwaynetwork.com. You can go out there, and our bios are there. You can see, where we live, what style of martial arts that we practice, and how long we've been doing that. So Mr. Roach is kind of our unique individual because he has traveled. He's lived in Korea. He's lived in Japan, I believe, as well for a while. And he speaks a lot of different languages quite fluently, I might add. And so he's a joy to have because he can bring back to us some of the etiquette and manners that he's learned in practicing and training in other countries. So with that, I'm going to have Mr. Roach come on out.
Okay, thank you very much. In my experience, the first thing that I want to say is that I think we need to keep in mind that the origin and the place of origin of where these martial arts are coming from has a very significant impact in the etiquette that is used in that martial art. And I think a lot of times people in America and people in the West specifically can have a lot of hard time sort of understanding the etiquette, the titles, and the bowing, and actually a lot of people can be very uncomfortable with it, especially at first. But I want to sort of emphasize that this is not something that is done solely in the context of a martial arts dojo or dojan. This is something that in Japan, in Korea, in China is an integral part of the society. So while there are certain things that are specific to certain styles in martial arts, if a Korean person walks into a dojan, or if a Japanese person walks into a dojo, there's already a mutual understanding of, I need to take off my shoes. I need to bow to certain people when I meet them. Okay? In the language itself, there are certain things that people need to understand. The first time you meet a Korean person, they may ask you very personal questions. How old are you? What if you're married or not? What your job title is? What you do for a living? And these things are important because that determines the way that I speak to that person. So to give you an example, in Korea specifically, if I walk down the street and I see someone who looks like he could be about my grandfather's age, I never use his name. I only call him Grandpa. Even though he has no blood relation to me, he is Grandpa. If I walk down the street and I see someone, let's say I'm walking on campus, and I meet someone for the first time, and I find out that they're in my the same major that I'm in, but they're a third year and I'm a second year, then immediately I understand that I am to address them as upperclassmen, the word for upperclassmen being sonbe, or in Japanese that word is senpai. So a lot of these cultures are vertically oriented in that sense. And it comes as a natural part of that culture. And so in America, we have more of a horizontal culture, a more sort of focus on everyone is equal, and that's fine, and that's good. And there are pros and cons to each side of that. But I think that it's a natural part of being in Korea, in Japan, in China. So it's not like as if I'm bound when I bow to someone. It's not something particularly special or out of the ordinary. It's just something that I've grown up to do. Korean parents, Japanese parents, it's one of the first things they teach their kids. I had the opportunity to meet a little girl who was adopted from Korea, and she was only about 2 years old at that time, but she had spent a year in Korea before, and she came to America, and I met her parents, and we talked, and I read some of the letters that her host family had written. And one of the things that it said in that letter was that she was taught how to bow. So if you put your hand on the back of her head or you put your hand on her back, she will bow. You say, "Inzae," right? Greet. It's a kind of a natural response. So I did that, and that little 2-year-old remembered to bow. And that is how deeply ingrained this is. It's just a natural part of, it's like in America we say please and thank you, right? We teach our kids over and over again. What are the magic words? Please and thank you. Bowing is just that, it's that natural. And parents will often put their hand on the back of their child's head and kind of push down and make them do that when the situation calls for it, until they learn to do that on their own. And so, some kids actually will put the hand on the back of their own head and do that before they learn that that's not part of the actual act itself. So when we're talking about cultural aspects of East Asia, I think of it kind of on a spectrum. And a lot of things that come from East Asia, because China is kind of the older brother, historically speaking. Japan, Okinawa, Korea, even Vietnam, all kind of looked to China as the older brother, as the example. They took religion, music, arts, fashion, all of these things came out of China and were sort of viewed with a kind of sense of awe and reverence for a long time. So this path goes from China and comes down into Korea and then into Japan, and actually a lot of times it comes directly to Okinawa from China. And what that means is there's kind of a spectrum of things. I think that today, in today's modern society, you kind of have Japan as being very strict about rules, very sort of custom-oriented and very paying attention to a lot of the details. So to a Japanese person, how low I bow has a lot more importance. It carries a lot more meaning. Whereas if I go to Korea, those sort of rigid or sort of strict standards become a little bit more flexible. So how low I bow may not be quite as important. But just the fact that I bow and that I'm acknowledging the other person. Now, an older person may not bow back to me, but on the other side of that, they may show a more caring attitude. Right? They reciprocate that respect in a way that shows a sense of caring and empathy toward me. One of the differences between Japan and Korea is that in Japan, a lot of times it's more common to bow with your hands at your sides, or to bow with your feet together and your hands in front of you. In Korea, when I do things, when I shake the hand of someone who's older than me or in higher rank than me, socially, then I will use both hands. When I receive things and I give things to someone that's older than me, I use both hands. And I think the reasoning behind this is that part of respect and part of that etiquette is that if I'm doing this with one hand and I can do something else with the other hand, it means I am not giving you my full attention. If I use both hands, that means all of my attention is given to you. So that's one difference. Now, if we move to China, at this point, and I think historically speaking as well, China has not had the same kind of bow and greeting that Japan and Korea have used more extensively, particularly in modern times. If I go to China, it will be much more common for me to just wave at someone or to shake someone's hand in place of bowing to them. In a martial arts context, a lot of times something like this or this is used. And that is not, in a Chinese context, that does not mean that they are being less respectful. It's just that, culturally speaking, that is what people do. That is what comes more naturally. In Japanese and Korean, the way that you speak is heavily impacted by formalities and understanding your relationship to other people. There are honorific systems, and the endings of sentences change based on the verb conjugations themselves change based on how much respect you want to show to that person. There's multiple words for I in Japanese and Korean, and those words for I are like on a spectrum of how important I think I am in relation to you. So there's a humble way to say the word I. There's a more formal way to say the word I. In Chinese, however, at least in modern Mandarin, they keep the titles. The titles work the same way pretty much in Japan and China and in Korea, however, to slightly different degrees. But Chinese and Mandarin does not have the same honorific system and is not grammatically set up the same as Korean and Japanese. So as a result, I think Chinese tend to be more direct, more kind of straightforward about things, whereas Japanese will talk, and the way they speak will be sort of very roundabout as a way of being very polite. They may not directly ask you questions. They may ask them in a sort of roundabout and longer way, whereas if you go to China, Chinese people will just ask you right away what they want to know. So there's this large spectrum of cultural customs that are deeply ingrained in the language and in the cultures of these places where those martial arts come from. And that has a large impact on how it's used in the context of each country, and it also can come across as very, very rude when you have interactions between Japanese and Chinese or Chinese and Koreans and things like that. But I think the main point is that we understand those things, that we understand that there are those differences and that we are willing and able to adapt to those circumstances. So, you know, especially if I go into like a capoeira kind of environment, it's actually very, very different. Respect is shown, and humility is an important and integral part of that. But there is no bowing. Instead, we shake hands, and that's good. That's a way of showing respect. That's how that environment works. So being adaptable to those different kinds of situations is important. And I think also when we understand those cultural roots, I think we become a little bit more accepting of that particular way. So if I have a school and a student comes in and they want to know, well, why are we bowing, and why are we doing this, and why are we doing it that way? Why do I have to call you this, and why do I have to call you that? My response will be, well, because this martial art comes from this culture, and we want to stay relatively close to the way that it's been practiced for a long time. That's the number one reason why we do it. Now, the number two reason is because we want to show respect. And it takes a certain degree of humility to be able to adapt to that situation. It takes a lot more humility for an American person, in my opinion, to bow than it does for a Japanese person who's used to bowing all the time. So that in itself is a feat and a kind of you're going out of your comfort zone, and it's sort of you're entering into another culture, really, when you enter into another school. So understanding those elements is crucial. I could talk for a really long time about this, so I think I'll just write a post about it, or a couple of posts about it, and yeah, we'll leave it there.
Mr. Roach, thank you so much for sharing, your insight into, different cultures, and I think it really helps to know that background when you step into a martial arts school, because it does symbolize a lot more. And as Americans, often we don't realize that, and to know some of that history really makes showing humility that much more powerful. I did have one question I wanted to ask each of you, and if you could just give a 1 or 2 word answer. I just am curious as to what you think. So here's the question when you're ready. We'll just kind of go down the line. We'll as a sign of humility and honor our rank. So we'll go according to rank here. So I believe based on rank and age, that would be Dr. Leach, then Mr. Osborne, then Mr. Roach, and then I'm sorry, then Mr. Rose, and then Mr. Roach. Okay, so here's the question. When visiting or joining a new martial arts school, what is one simple gesture that would instantly impress you or the instructor? So if you're the instructor and somebody's visiting you at your school, what's one simple thing that that new student can do that would totally impress you? All right, go.
If that's for me, it would be, frankly, to get the stances correct. The heck with the. I know you're talking about etiquette here, but that's kind of an idea. I guess it would be to have someone come up and ask when they don't know what they have in mind, or I'm not sure really what you're asking. So, okay.
I'm mainly just looking for, what's something that you would recommend to a brand new student who came into the school to do in order to show humility or respect. One simple gesture or action.
Is it on me now?
Yes, let's go ahead, Mr. Osborne.
Okay, I didn't know we were still okay. Well, I tell you what, I wouldn't give a tip to a new student. Here's the reason why I say that. That gives me a base to see what I'm working with. The first time, and even if it's a small one, even to adult, that first impression, how they present themselves to me, gives me a base to determine what I'm working with. If I have a young man or a young woman that comes up to me and they're yes sir, yes ma'am already out the door, that means we already have a foundation. If I've got a young student or older student and they can't make eye contact, they don't shake my hand, they're looking around all over the place, then I know that there's things that the basics that I've got to teach. So I wouldn't prompt somebody to impress the instructor right away, because as far as me as an instructor, when I'm looking at a new student, that gives me the indication on what I've got to work with, and that gives me my base. So I know what that student has maybe in their personal life built already, or what they don't have, and that's something that we've got to be able to take care of and to get better at. And then if they already have that kind of yes sir, yes ma'am, they already have that discipline and stuff like that, then there's something else that we've got to work on and channel to get better at. And this is a side note. I just wanted to add this real quick. One of the things that everybody's talking about when we're talking about humility and stuff like that, I think one of the things that got lost, I came up in the 80s and early 90s when martial arts was about the tough guys. When I grew up with martial arts, they were all kickboxers, they were all fighters. I think the thing about martial arts is the self-development side. I think that is something that's coming back around now. I think people forget how much martial arts is about self-development. Taking a student and turn them into maybe a quiet student, turn them into a student council president, or somebody that maybe wouldn't be very good on a job interview and they wind up getting a job that they've always wanted because of martial arts. So self-development, I think, is a huge thing that is coming back around as far as martial arts go. Even though we have MMA and we have people that are tough and stuff like that, I think that got lost at some point in time, the self-development side. And I think what we're all talking about today, that with martial arts, I mean, really everything we're tying into, I mean, really self-development is a huge thing, and I think it's starting to come back around. So that's just kind of a side note there. That was more than 2 words. Sorry, you know how I am.
Thank you. That's great. You're so right. The self-development that you said, I think that to me that's pinnacle. That's pinnacle to creating a well-rounded martial artist. But let's go ahead and hit Mr. Rose now. Well, not literally, but let's give it over to him.
But I don't think I can beat that. I really don't think I can beat that answer. My one-word answer was going to be effort, right? The effort they put in from the moment they walk in, whether it's the effort to show courtesy by saying sir and ma'am, the effort by when I shake their hand, they bow to me, the effort on the floor, how hard they try, how little they complain, just the effort they put into anything, whether it's something they find easy or something they find hard. And I grade more on the stuff someone finds easy. How hard do you work on the stuff you find easy? I want to see that effort. If you can put an immense amount of effort into something that's easy for you, then you will have the ability to do something that's hard for you. And publicly, I don't know, they might get mad at me for this, but publicly, I want to very much want to thank Mr. Osborne Jr. and Mr. Kevin Luttrell for helping me out in an extreme time of need. And I bring it up now because all this time we've been talking about being humble with other martial artists, and they will open their world to you. And these two men, we live a long ways away from each other, but I feel like they've really opened their world to me and helped me out. And it really comes down to everything we've talked about today, but from the instructor's perspective. I made a post on Facebook the other day. I'm honest with my students. There are things I cannot do well. I'm not the best fighter out there. I have students that are fantastic, absolutely incredible, but I'm not. And I have a lot of people that do come in and question that sometimes, but you know, then I run into people like Mr. Osborne Jr., Mr. Kevin Luttrell, that don't look at my ability, they look at the effort I've put in for the past 10 years or longer, the effort that I've tried, and I keep trying to find new ways, I keep trying to find ways to do it. A lot of my forms and my style require high leg raises. I have extraordinarily tight hips. My cold split stretch goes 100 degrees. That's nothing. Most beginners can walk in and go farther than that. And though I may have started finding some stuff to unlock it, there's a lot of people along the way who have showed me new systems, new stretches, new exercises, new ways to do it, new ways to throw the same old kicks, new round kick techniques, new side kick techniques, and it's still given me the opportunities based on my effort to try to constantly get better. And and because of that, that's the way I grade my students as well. And I feel like because that's the way I grade my students, we have also gotten a few who show, you know, an extreme amount of skill and talent. I'm not saying national champion, nothing like that. We don't have anything like that. I'm just saying they show a lot of skill on the floor, and they show a lot of skill in tournament. And the humility that your students show and their ability to admit their flaws to others and things like that in other schools and around other martial artists and at tournaments. Also, I find martial artists I don't know, school owners I don't know, coming up to me and going, man, not only was your student really good in the ring, this happened at Osborne Junior tournament, not only was your student awesome in the ring, but I talked to him afterward, and you know, he almost like talked down on himself, was talking about what he needed to fix, and helped my student that he sparred against, showed him some things he could do that could beat what he was doing, you know. And so this other instructor came up to me and showed me an immense amount of respect based on the actions of my student, and I just thought it was absolutely incredible. But I wanted to put that public thank you out there to Mr. Luttrell and Mr. Osborne Jr. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. All right, last but not least, we'll go right back to Mr. Roach. If you could tell us what you look for as far as something that would impress you or that you recommend when visiting another martial arts school.
Thank you. So the first thing I would look for is a smile. I would think I would be impressed right away if someone walked in and they smiled. The second thing that I would look for perhaps is just the way that they walk. If they walk in with their chest puffed out and that kind of a sort of macho kind of strut, then that indicates something very different to me than someone who walks in with a little bit more caution, perhaps. And the third thing is just a desire to understand. So if they walk in and they're, as Hanshi Leach said, if they walk in and they're asking questions and actively showing a desire to understand, then I think those three things, a smile, the way they walk in, and what questions they ask when they walk in, are great indicators, and that would make me impressed with this new student.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. It's nice to see our full panel again, and we are looking forward to an action-packed season 2. And I wanted to let you know that we're going to continue doing these every other week. So Sunday is going to be our day for season 2. 11 o'clock seems to work pretty well for most of us. This is 11 Central Time. We may adjust that depending on schedules, but I just wanted to let everyone know that's out there that we welcome you to watch season 2. Our next topic that we kind of brainstormed about, we're going to do it not next Sunday, but the following. So looking at my calendar here, that would be the 11th of October, I believe. And what we're going to do is we're going to do framing and body mechanics. And this is something that Dr. Leach brought up, and this will actually be an active TV show. We're going to be hosting it at our dojo here in Branson, Missouri, and we will show full body and show some different tips on, no matter what art that you're in, how you can use framing and body mechanics to improve your techniques. And this comes from somebody who has a very intimate understanding of how the human body works as a medical doctor and studying anatomy. So it should be interesting. I look forward to that. And of course, all of you on the panel are welcome to participate in that, and you may have some things to add as well. So with that, we'll end for today. See you on the next Marshall Way Network TV. Take care.